The doors of the Portuguese synagogue close behind him. It is July, Amsterdam, 1656. He is 23 years old. Inside, the elders stand. The candles burn low. A decree is read aloud. Words so severe, so final, that they have rarely been spoken in this community's history. Cursed, excommunicated, cast out. Every door in this world closed in a single evening. No trial, no witnesses called, no crime named. He walks out into the summer night. The canal reflects nothing. The city moves around him as if he no longer exists. What do you do when the people who shaped you decide you are too dangerous to keep? He went home. He lit a candle. And he started to write. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand what the Jewish community of Amsterdam was. These were not ordinary people living ordinary lives. They were refugees, descendants of families expelled from Spain and Portugal, some just decades before, who had watched their ancestors forced to convert, hunted, burned. They had carried their fate across oceans, hidden it in cellars, passed it in whispers from parent to child. Amsterdam had given them something rare, a place to exist openly, a synagogue, a community, a name. That was not just religion, this was survival made visible. And survival, when it has cost everything, becomes something people protect at any price. A young man asking uncomfortable questions about God, whether the Torah was divinely written, whether the soul was immortal, whether the God of the Bible was truly the God of the universe, was not just a philosophical irritation. He was a threat to the only thing keeping them whole. They didn't cast him out because they hated him. They cast him out because they were afraid. Baruch Spinoza was born in Amsterdam in 1632, the son of a merchant family that had fled Portugal a generation before. He was quiet, precise, unusually still for a young man. Those who knew him described the same quality again and again. He listened longer than anyone else before he spoke, and when he spoke, what he said could not easily be unsaid. He had studied the Torah deeply enough to begin asking questions that the Torah could not answer. He had read Descartes, Hobbes, the ancient Stoics. He had started to see the world not as a place governed by a personal God who intervened in human affairs, but as something else entirely. A system, a totality, a thing that simply was, without judgment, without favoritism, without exception. He did not arrive at these ideas in rebellion. He arrived at them carefully, the way a craftsman works a piece of glass, grinding it slowly, removing everything that distorts, until what remains lets the light pass through clearly. He was 23 years old, and he had already seen more clearly than most men see in a lifetime. That clarity would cost him everything. Amsterdam in 1657 was a city of contradictions. It was the most tolerant city in Europe, and also one of the most commercially ruthless. Ideas moved through its canals as freely as goods. Descartes had lived here. Rembrandt painted here. The printing presses ran day and night. But tolerance in Amsterdam was never unconditional. It extended as far as commerce required and stopped where social order felt threatened. The Jewish community existed within this tolerance carefully, gratefully, and fragility. They had survived too much to risk provoking the city that had taken them in. A young man openly questioning the foundations of Scripture was not just their problem. It was a problem they could not afford. Beyond Amsterdam, the Inquisition still operated. Books were burned, men were tried. The memory of what happened to those who taught too freely was not abstract. It was in the bodies of grandparents, in the silences at dinner tables, in the nightmares of people who had crossed the water to be safe. In this world, truth was not always something you could afford to say out loud. Spinoza said it anyway. The decree issued against Spinoza on July 27, 1656, is the harshest ever recorded in the Amsterdam Jewish community's history. It speaks of abominable heresies and monstrous deeds. It forbids anyone from communicating with him, reading his writings, coming within 4 cubits of his presence. No specifics, no charges, no named offenses. Historians have debated for centuries what he actually did to provoke it. Some believe he had already shared early versions of his ideas privately. Some believe it was a preemptive strike, the community sensing where his thinking was heading and choosing to act before he could write it down. We do not know. What we know is what he did next. He left the community. He moved to a small room on the outskirts of the city. He found work as a lens grinder, cutting and polishing glass for microscopes and telescopes. The instruments through which his century was learning to see the world as it actually was. The work was slow, precise, done in silence. The candle burned down to nothing. He didn't notice. He was still grinding. And in the hours that the lens work left him, he wrote. Not letters for appeal, not pleas for reinstatement, not anger. He wrote philosophy. What Spinoza wrote in that small room would not be published in his lifetime. He knew what it would cost him if it were. But he wrote it anyway. His central idea was this: God and nature are not two separate things. They are the same thing, seen from different angles. There's no God who stands outside the universe and intervenes in it. There's only the universe itself, infinite, eternal, operating according to laws that do not bend for prayers, for kings, or for the suffering of good people. Deus sive natura, God or nature, one word, two faces. This was not atheism in the way his enemies claimed. It was something stranger and more unsettling. A God too large to be owned by any community, too impersonal to be bargained with, too total to be escaped. And from this followed something even more radical. If everything that exists is part of this single infinite substance, then human beings are not separate souls dropped into bodies from outside. We are models of God, expressions of nature. We do not stand apart from the world and judge it. We are the world, briefly aware of itself. Free will, as most people understand it, the sense that you could have chosen differently, that your choices flowed free of cause and effect. Spinoza said this was an illusion. The feeling of freedom comes from not knowing all the causes that move us. You think you are free because you don't see the chains. But here is where Spinoza's philosophy turns, and this is what his enemies never fully understood. Knowing the chains does not enslave you further. It is the beginning of real freedom. When you understand what you truly are, a finite expression of an infinite nature, shaped by causes you did not choose, you stop fighting reality. You stop demanding that the world be other than it is. You stop performing for an audience that will never fully see you. You become, for the first time, yourself. We live in a world that has perfected the mechanism of belonging. Every platform, every algorithm, every social structure rewards agreement and punishes deviation. The exile Spinoza experienced in one night, we experience it in smaller doses, daily. A thought left unspoken, a belief quietly abandoned, a version of yourself kept hidden because the cost of showing it feels too high. You have felt this, the moment you knew something was true and said nothing. The slow negotiation between what you believe and what you are allowed to believe. The way a community, any community, can make you feel that belonging and honesty are a trade. Spinoza's answer to this was not heroism. He was not a man who enjoyed suffering. His answer was clarity. When you understand clearly what you are, what the world is, and what the relationship between the two actually consists of, the approval of others loses its power over you, not because you stop caring about people, but because you stop needing them to confirm your existence. The lens grinder in his small room, working by candlelight while Amsterdam moved on without him. He was not a tragic figure. He was the freest man in the city. Spinoza died in 1677 at the age of 44. Lung disease, likely from years of breathing glass dust in that small room. He never married. He never held a university position. He turned down a professorship at the Heidelberg because he feared it would compromise his freedom to think. His major work, The Ethics, was published posthumously. It went on to reshape Western philosophy, influence Einstein, Goethe, and George Eliot, and become one of the most studied texts in the history of human thought. He ground the glasses, he let the light through, and then he was gone. What he left behind was not comfort. It was something harder and more lasting. The idea that truth does not need your community's permission to be true. That the moment you stop needing approval is the moment you become capable of something real. The exile, in the right hands, is not a punishment. It is a beginning. This week, say one true thing you have been keeping quiet, not to provoke, not to perform, just because it is true, and you are done pretending otherwise. That is where it begins.